Americans expected not only their freedom, but also their freedom dues. Some combination of land, seed, tools, and clothes to help them begin anew. Freedom dues represented a promise, for a very few, a path up from poverty into the wealth, security, and prominence of the privileged planter class. For most, at least the bare essentials of subsistence living, enough to keep poverty at bay. This book focuses on the clash and convergence of two fundamental human conditions, freedom and bondage, and how that clash and convergence has played out in America. The clash between freedom and bondage is obvious. Not surprisingly, many masters like Charles Lucas refused to pay freedom dues, especially when it came to land grants. This failure to pay freedom dues was but one of many means by which landholding masters thwarted the aspirations of indentured servants. Brutal working conditions, refusing to abide by contracts, arbitrary extension of the terms of indenture were others. But landowners fought most bitterly to prevent those formerly bonded to them, black or white, from owning land, which, after all, was the basis of colonial-era power and wealth. So, in this conflict between those who owned land and those who felt deserving of land lies another, equally potent force coursing through early America: the amassing of wealth and power by a few, and the denial of even a portion of that wealth and power to many. Here is the earliest glimmer of the 1% in America, for the roots of wealth inequality lay in this gathering and holding tight of land. Here, too, lay the earliest roots of the 99%, calling for a reversal of this inequality in the form of freedom dues. And this contest between masters and servants, between the landed and the landless, between those denying freedom dues and those demanding them, between freedom and bondage, has animated America ever since. The convergence between freedom and bondage is less obvious. In his books and lectures, the late Edmund S. Morgan, a professor of American history at Yale University, captured this convergence succinctly. In America, Morgan said, freedom presupposes bondage. In other words, there is no freedom without bondage. Here's what Morgan was getting at. Take any of the slaveholding founders, for example, Washington, Jefferson, or Madison. In previous generations, they were considered heroes because of the lofty ideals of freedom and equality they espoused. The fact that they owned slaves was never an issue, even though slavery was diametrically opposed to freedom. In modern times, the fact that most founders owned slaves looms large. For some, this hypocrisy looms larger than the ideals of freedom they espoused. On one hand, freedom is most important. On the other hand, bondage is most important. Morgan would say that either position misses a deeper truth, a truth that is both more revealing and more damning. Without slavery, the founders would not have been able to pontificate on the lofty ideals of freedom that made their way into documents like the Declaration, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. They would have been so tied to their land, growing their crops, mostly tobacco, that they simply would not have had time for anything else. Cultivating tobacco, it turns out, even with slave labor, was incredibly time-consuming. Thus, freedom in early America was a privilege that derived from slavery. This idea of an inextricable link between freedom and slavery proves to be extremely useful. It's a means for understanding why almost 25% of the U.S. Constitution is related to the support of slavery, while the word slavery is never mentioned in the original text. It's a tool for examining the Emancipation Proclamation and Lincoln's motives, then realizing the proclamation itself did not free a single slave. And it's the basis for understanding how black labor built white power and wealth. If, historically speaking, there was no freedom without slavery in America, then the institutions of power and wealth that emerged in America owe themselves to the slavery upon which America established its freedom. Pick an institution, any institution. Agriculture, politics, jurisprudence, religion, medicine, police.